Let me save you some time and probably some money. If you're looking to train pull-ups at home, but you need assistance, you really only have 3 realistic options. You can hang bands from a pull-up bar, which works, but it gets annoying really fast. You can buy a plate-loaded assisted machine, which works well, but takes up space and it needs plates. Or you can go commercial, which works great, but they're huge, heavy, expensive, and basically permanent pieces of your gym once you get it in there. This right here is the cheapest dedicated assisted pull-up machine I found that tries to live in the middle of all of that. So the real question isn't, is it perfect? It's whether it makes actual sense in a real home gym. So a quick pause before we go any further. If you train at home and you care about real trade-offs, not hype or spec sheet nonsense, you should be subscribed. That's literally what we do here. But all right, let's get into it. Most assisted pull-up machines aren't just expensive, they're forever decisions. Once they're in your gym, that's where they live. You don't casually move them and you don't rethink that purchase without a headache. So, what the Sportsroyals PT4, which is marketed by Fed Fitness, is trying to do is give you assisted pull-ups and dips without committing a room, a hallway, or half your usable space to one piece of equipment. And it's doing that at the lowest cost I've personally seen for a dedicated assisted unit. That alone puts it in a different category. Whether that trade-off is worth it, that's what the rest of this review is really about. So let's talk price. If you just go to Google and search assisted pull-up machine, the next 3 you'll see everywhere are the GMWD, the PowerTech, and the Titan. They're popular, established, and they're easy to find. At MSRP, this one is $299, GMWD is $699, PowerTech jumps to $1,079, and Titan lands in at $1,264.99. To be fair, all of these brands run sales basically all year long, and as of filming this, all 4 are on sale. But here's the part people miss. Prices move, the gap doesn't. And that gap shows up again when we talk about build quality, smoothness, and expectations. Space matters in a home gym, especially if your gym is also your house. This unit has a small footprint, and more importantly, it's light enough to move. I can push it against the wall when I'm done, then pull it back out when I want to train pull-ups. That's not happening with a plate-loaded or a commercial machine. Once those are down, they're married to that spot. So let's talk build quality, because this is where people get tripped up if expectations aren't set correctly. At $299 MSRP, and especially closer to $230 on sale, this is budget gear. It's built cheaply, and that shouldn't surprise anyone. That said, once it's assembled properly and everything is tightened down correctly, it's surprisingly sturdy. Nothing feels unsafe, nothing feels like it's about to fold under you. There is one important caveat. Use the washers and don't over torque everything trying to make it feel commercial. If you do, you can actually start bending metal. It's not a defect, that's just the reality of thinner steel and value-based construction. Treat it respectfully, and it performs exactly how it should. Is it buttery smooth? No, the carriage isn't super smooth, the rollers are basic plastic. And there is friction in the system. That friction does add a bit of resistance. But let's be honest, at under $300, who actually cares? If you want ultra smooth, perfectly measured resistance, where you're getting exactly X pounds of assistance at every point in the rep, you're shopping in a completely different category and paying a lot more. This doesn't get used that way anyways. In real life, you're running 1 band, 2 bands, 3 bands, or all 4. You're not tracking progress by exact pounds, you're tracking it by band count. More bands means more help, fewer bands means less help. It's fairly simple, that's it. And for what this is, that approach works. One important clarification here, these aren't loose loop bands thrown over a pull-up bar. They are stoppered bands that attach directly into the carriage and run over a plastic pulley. That matters because the assistant stays centered, The carriage tracks straight up and down, and you're not fighting bands drifting side to side. You still get a band strength curve, more help at the bottom, less at the top, but the delivery of that assistance is much cleaner than DIY setups. And we didn't guess on this, we measured it. We ran a known 50-pound load through the system using a fixed pulley and a luggage scale. With no assistance, at about 3/4 of the rep, the scale read 51 pounds, which tells us pulley friction is minimal. We added one band, and that dropped to 37 pounds on the scale. With two bands, it dropped to 18 pounds. So when I added a third band, it was actually too much assistance for the 50-pound load. The plate started to hover at full stretch, so we bumped the load up to 70 pounds. And at that same measuring point, it read 15 pounds. So with all four bands, we went up to 115 pounds, and the scale read 41 pounds, putting total assistance in the ballpark of 75 pounds at that same point in the rep. So some quick transparency notes. With 3 and 4 bands at full stretch, the assistance is strong enough that the bands will hover a bit off the floor. That's just how bands work. To keep things consistent, every measurement was taken at the same spot in the movement about 3/4 of the way up. And if you're wondering why those numbers aren't perfectly even band to band, it's expected. Band elasticity varies, measurement points aren't millimeter perfect, and this was never meant to be a scientific lab test. This was a very unscientific, real-world test meant to give you a rough idea of what each band level actually does. And now you and we have that context. One more thing worth saying out loud, band assistance is always changing. The more the band is stretched, the more help it gives you. That means you get the most assistance out of the hole and the least assistance at the top of the rep. And if we want to be nitpicky, that's not a perfect strength curve for pull-ups. You're strongest at the stretch and weakest near the top. But in practice, that extra help out of the dead hang is exactly where most people struggle, so it works just fine for assisted pull-ups. Now let's talk actual pull-ups. Overall, this does exactly what you want an assisted pull-up machine to do. The assistance is strongest at the bottom, then tapers as you move up towards the top. The reps feel natural, you're not getting yanked through anything, you're just getting enough help to keep moving. Because the assistance always stays centered and predictable, doing volume here is way easier than with loose bands. Is it commercial smooth? No. But honestly, a lot of used commercial machines aren't either. At around 250 pounds, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to get better at pull-ups. And this lets me train them consistently. Grip-wise, you've got more options than you might think. You can go wide and pronated on the outside of the post, come inside a bit narrower, shoulder width, doing a pronated grip, or flip it to supinated if you want more bicep involvement. I do wish there was a built-in neutral grip, but you can add attachments if that matters to you. And a simple way to think about this, overhand puts a little more on your back and feels harder. Underhand lets your biceps help more and often feels easier. You're still using both either way, you're just changing the bias. So maybe one pull day you were a little light on curls, flip to supinated and keep your pull-ups moving. Other days, you go overhand and maybe your back will do more work that day. On assisted dips, these lean more towards chest and front delt dominant than pure tricep dips. To get your knees squarely on the pad, you're naturally positioned a bit forward, which puts you into a deeper pec stretch at the bottom. You still hit triceps, but there isn't a ton of adjustability here to make this a strict triceps only dip. For most people, that's just a slight bias, not a deal breaker. And once you switch to non-assisted dips, that constraint goes away entirely. One nice differentiator here, and this is something people gloss over, is that by removing the assisted seat and flipping it into a back pad, this also works as a power tower. And you can do knee raises and full leg raises on it, and honestly, it works well for that. The pad is comfortable enough, and positioning makes sense, and if it feels stable when you're actually using it. Most assisted machines are basically one-trick ponies. This lets you train pull-ups, dips, and core work in the same footprint, which adds more value than it sounds like on paper. I do have a couple nitpicks for this. I'd love a neutral grip bar in a V2, and I'd rather see the push-up handles integrated into steps, making it easier to get into position. Not deal breakers, just quality of life stuff. So before anyone says it, yes, you can hang a band from a pull-up bar. It's cheap, It works, and I did it for a long time. But that setup, band management, and getting in and out eventually became annoying enough that I stopped wanting to use it. And if something makes you less likely to train, that matters. I'll also say this, I still own and regularly use an older stack-loaded Graviton pull-up and dip machine. It's commercial, selectorized, the whole deal. And even that isn't perfectly smooth anymore. It's huge, heavy, loud, and literally lives in my hallway. Commercial doesn't automatically mean perfect. I'm also a tonal owner, and for a long time the issue with pull downs there was bracing. Once you go heavy, it just lifts you off the bench. Assisted pull-ups remove that problem entirely, and that's what I came up on. So even now that I have better pull-down options, I'll always keep doing pull-ups. They feel more natural to me, and I use them more consistently. And knowing all of that, if I'm being completely honest, if I didn't already own the Graviton, I don't think I'd let this go. I'd be completely fine using it long term. Is it perfect? No. Is it commercial? No. But it gets the job done. It lets me train assisted pull-ups consistently, it fits my space, and it doesn't ask much of me. And at this price point, I can genuinely appreciate that. If this kind of honest, real-world breakdown helps you figure out what actually makes sense for your home gym, that's why you should be subscribed. And if you do decide to pick one up, whether that's on Amazon or directly from Fed Fitness, we'd really appreciate you using one of the links in the description or pinned comment. Amazon is usually a little more expensive than buying direct because of the storefront fees, but it's also easy and familiar, so buy however you're comfortable. Either way, using our links helps support the channel, and we do really appreciate that.